heart. And many of you, if you've been here for a while, you've heard me talk about there's a difference between your belief and your behavior. A lot of times we look at somebody's behavior, but God looks at our belief. Now, your belief should absolutely have a bearing on your behavior. Your behavior should absolutely have a bearing on your belief. And your attitude is what controls your actions. But Jesus didn't just look at the actions. He looked at the attitude behind the actions. He just didn't look at the behavior. He looked at the belief behind the behavior. Because what did Jesus say? Well, if you've looked at another person with lust, then you've committed adultery. If you look at a person and you say, "You fool," well, you've already committed murder. So, guess what I'm saying here is, without Christ, all of us would be in this verse. But because of Christ, none of us have to be in this verse. None of us have to be in this verse. None of us are going to be held accountable for those things because Jesus has already been held accountable. The cowardly, the unbelieving, the cowardly, those who were so fearful that they wouldn't give in to Jesus. They're unbelieving. Abominable. I had to look that word up. I've always heard of the abominable snowman. What does abominable mean? It means smelly. I didn't know snowmen smelled, but apparently that's one of the many words. It means smelly, stinky. It's a stench. Fearful, smelly, hate-filled, self-seeking. When the word there, sorcerers, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. This word sorcery is where we get our word pharmacy, pharmakia. It can have to do with a lot of things, but we know that a lot of times drugs are what lead people into the occult and things like that. So it's just all part of that. Verse number 9. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." Now, I bet this angel likes this assignment way better than he liked his last assignment, where it was to pour out one of the 7 bowls of the wrath of God. So he gets, and I love this, because all through Revelation, how many times have we seen an angel come up to John and go, "Come here, let me show you something. Yeah, I know God's talking, and he's okay with this, but just come over here and I want you to look over here." So John is getting taken by this angel who earlier has had to pour out some pretty horrible stuff, but now he gets to show something that is exciting and glorifying. I'm going to show you the bride. I'm going to show you the wife of the Lamb. Guys, y'all know it's nice to get to show off your wife. It's nice, amen, brother. That was very quick, Zale. Golden star. I mean, how many of y'all carry a picture of your wife somewhere, guys? I don't want to get in trouble here, so I'm not gonna pick out my wife. But the first thing I always talk to people about is my wife. I flew to West Palm over the weekend and spent some time with my mom and dad. And anybody who sits next to me finds out about my wife, and then they find out about my kids, and then eventually I tell them about y'all if they can handle it. I go there, but we love to do that. And so the angel is saying, "Hey, look, I want to show you the bride. I want to give you a glimpse of the beautiful bride, the wife of the Lamb." So verses 10 and 11 say this. And so John says, "And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and he showed me the holy city." Now, back early on, it talked about the bride and about the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from earth. So in the Spirit, he takes me to a great high mountain. He showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. Her brilliance was like a very costly stone, as a stone of crystal clear jasper. Now, he's going to have to take me up pretty high because what I'm about to see is pretty big. If you're even, when I was a kid, I went to Cape Kennedy, and we would look at the building where they would assemble the rockets. And if you stand up and you look up, you literally could fall backwards because you're looking so straight up. We did that when we were in Washington back. We went up to the Washington Monument, and you stand there and you look straight up. Well, in order to see the enormity of that, you have to kind of get back from it. So that's what's happening here. John is being kept away, or taken away in the Spirit from a pretty good distance so he can see how big this thing is. Verse 12. It had a great and high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and the names were written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel. In Revelation, we've already seen, and we're going to continue to see, a lot of similarities between the original temple and the city of Jerusalem, and because God thinks, I've had this great idea, and he'll use that same idea over again. He also is extremely creative, where he'll do something he's never done before, but God will go back. And here he's going back. He's taking the 12 names of the tribes of the sons of Israel, and he is using them in this beautiful city. So there's a lot of similarities. The 12 tribes of Israel. If you can see this, and I know it's kind of small, but there's Dan, Asher, Naphtali, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Reuben, Simeon, Gad, Benjamin, Manasseh, Ephraim. Okay, that was how the camps would be set up around when they would set the tabernacle up. And you notice whenever God always measures something, when we say something here, forget I said anything. I'm going to ask you to name off the 4 points of the compass. On the count of 3, I just want you all to say them. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. North, south, east, west. Okay, that's the American way. Okay, we live here in America, so we say north, south, east, and west. But you notice how many times in the Bible they don't do that. They start with east. Why is it? Because the center of everything was in the east. And so he goes on to talk about the east, and then he goes from there. So it has a great high wall. It has 12 gates. There are 12 angels. Their names are written on them. These are the names of the 12 tribes. And then there are 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, and 3 gates on the west. Okay? There's 4 sets of 3 gates, and that's just kind of cool. Verse 14, and the wall of the city had 12 foundation stones, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So now we're going to take the Old Testament, which has the 12 tribes, and we're going to blend it with the 12 apostles, which are New Testament. Okay, so here's a question, and some of you probably already know. Who is the 12th apostle? Paul. Sorry. Herb says it's Paul. Anybody would agree or disagree? Herb agrees with himself, which is always a good thing. I am unanimous in this, I believe, Zadil. Okay, well, we know it's not Judas, and it's probably not Matthias. Although he was a great guy, and he got voted in to, by lot, he got drawn to be the 12th person that took Judas's place. But many Bible scholars agree with Herb, thank you, Herb, that Paul, because how much did Paul have to do with building the church? A lot. He had a lot more to do than we would say Matthias did. And when I meet Matthias, he goes, hey, dude, look, I did my part. I'm not picking on Matthias. I'm just saying that Paul had a pretty major role. And there are a lot of theologians who believe that Paul is that 12th foundation stone. The wall of the city had 12 foundation stones, and of them were 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Verse 15. The one who spoke with me had a gold measuring rod to measure the city and its gates and its walls. Now, I've worked with David Klein. David Klein does not own a golden measuring rod. Do you? Okay. I don't know. I was straightening my... As long as it's taken me to get through Revelation, I've also been trying to clean my garage out, and I'm no closer on that. But I have this drawer that I keep things like, a speed square and 18 tape measures, because every man needs to have at least 18 tape measures, and I keep them in order in there, okay? None of them are golden measuring rods. I would be, if you want to give that to me as a Christmas present, I'm fine with that. But he has this golden measuring rod. We're going to find out in a minute that the angelic measuring rod is the same as the human measuring rod. Now, I don't know if ours copies theirs or theirs copies ours. I think it's pretty cool. It doesn't tell us whether it's metric or standard. So we'll find that out when we get to heaven. So he has this gold measuring rod to measure the city and its gates. Verse 16. Now here, begin to think about this. The city, this is New Jerusalem. This is the bride. This is the center of where God is going to be dwelling and we're going to be hanging out. The city is laid out as a square, and its length is as great as its width, which is actually the definition of a square. Okay? Measured the city with the rod, 1,500 miles. Okay? Now, that's a really long rod right there if you think about it, or something, but he's measuring out 1,500 miles. Now, I know the Bible uses a different language, but this is what our Bible says, 1,500 miles. Its length and width and height are equal. Okay, so I want to show you 1,500 miles. Okay, so 1,500 miles, 1,500 miles. How do you find this? How do you find the square mileage of this, class? You multiply 1,500 by 1,500, and you would quickly come up with, I think, like 25 million, I think is what I wrote down. Yeah, no, 2,250,000 square miles. That's a pretty big piece of property, okay? To give you an idea, that is what a 15 by 15 square put in the middle of our country would look like, okay? That's a pretty big area. But it didn't just say it was a square. It does have walls, but notice it said here that its length and width and height are equal. So it's not a square, it's a cube. You guys are so smart. If you took a cube that is 1,500 by 1,500 by 1,500, and then you made a ball that it would be big enough to sit in it, it would be the size of the moon. This is a big city. I'm just blown away by this. It's kind of cool. Okay, now, the cool thing is this is just our home base, that we get to wander other than in this spot. I think we're going to spend all eternity wandering and exploring and doing some pretty cool things. But this is not a little, it's a little, I have a little place in the country, you know. I have a country in the country. I have a moon in the country that we're going to dwell on. It's a cube, a 1,500 by 1,500 by 1,500 cube. Verse 17, and he measured its walls 72 yards, according to human measurements, which are also angelic measurements. The wall is 72 yards, which is 216 feet, or approximately 12 stories. Now, I don't know why we have walls in this city, other than God just wants there to be walls, because if there weren't walls, we couldn't have gates, and he wants there to be gates. So I'm not sure why we need walls, because there's nobody to keep in and there's nobody to keep out that we don't want in or out. But it's pretty amazing that the walls around the city are going to be 12 stories high. Verse 18, the material of the wall was jasper, and the city was pure gold, like clear glass. Pretty nice. The foundation stones of the city wall were adorned with every kind of precious stone. And here they list the first foundation stone, jasper, sapphire, chalcedony, I don't know, emerald. Thank you very much. If I point at you from now on, just say the word for me. Sardonyx, sardius, chrysolite, beryl, topaz. Thank you very much. Jacinth and amethyst. Okay? Does that ring any bells? The breastplate of the priest. There are so many of these stones that are repetitive. Because remember, if God thought it was beautiful enough to adorn the temple early on, he's still okay with it being beautiful enough. But then we're not talking about stones this size, apparently. We're talking about some pretty big stones. As a matter of fact, we go on to look at what the gates are made out of. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Okay, this is a 12-story high wall. The gates are probably rather large, wouldn't you think? There's only 3 gates for every 1,500 miles. So they're probably pretty large gates. And they're made out of a single pearl.